The cold New York air bit at Holden Caulfield's face as he trudged through the streets, his breath forming small clouds that dissipated as quickly as they appeared. He didn't have a clear plan, but his thoughts kept drifting to Phoebe, his little sister. Of all the people in his life, she was the one who made him feel less like a misfit and more like someone worth caring about. Phoebe had a way of cutting through the nonsense and seeing him for who he was, something no one else seemed able to do. Holden arrived outside his family's apartment building long after dark. The doorman was familiar, but Holden had no intention of being noticed. He slipped through the service entrance, climbing the stairs slowly, his heart pounding with the effort to stay quiet. The hallway to the Caulfields' apartment was eerily still, and as he approached the door, he hesitated, suddenly unsure if he should go through with it. But the thought of seeing Phoebe spurred him on. He knew she'd be asleep, but he also knew she'd forgive him for waking her. Carefully, he turned the knob and stepped into the apartment, his movements silent. The familiar warmth and smell of home hit him like a wave. He was here as a fugitive from yet another school, a disappointment yet again. Phoebe's room was just down the hall. He cracked the door open, and there she was curled under her covers with a book lying open on her chest. Even in sleep, she looked sharp and knowing, her lips slightly parted as though she were about to call out some clever retort. Holden smiled for what felt like the first time in days. "Phoebe," he whispered, stepping closer to her bed. "Wake up, kiddo. It's me." Phoebe stirred, her brow furrowing as she blinked up at him. For a moment, she looked confused, and then her face broke into a smile. "Holden," she exclaimed, sitting up and throwing her arms around his neck. Her voice was a mixture of delight and surprise, and it made Holden's chest ache in the best possible way. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hushed, but full of curiosity. Holden shrugged, trying to play it cool. "I just wanted to see you. Missed you, that's all." Phoebe, being Phoebe, didn't buy it for a second. She tilted her head, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Did you get kicked out of another school?" Holden tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out hollow. "Yeah," he admitted, sitting down on the edge of her bed. "I guess I did." Phoebe sighed, a sound far too mature for someone her age. "Daddy's gonna kill you." Holden didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked around her room, taking in the books and drawings scattered everywhere. It was so distinctly Phoebe, creative, bright, and full of life. He envied her in that moment. She was still untouched by the things that weighed him down, still full of hope and possibility. As they talked, Holden found himself opening up to her in a way he hadn't with anyone else. He told her about the phonies at Pensy Prep, about the people he'd met in the city, and about how everything seemed so fake and hollow. Phoebe listened intently, her small face serious, her eyes fixed on his. Then she asked the question that stopped him cold. "Is there anything you actually like?" Holden thought about it for a long time. He wanted to say her. Phoebe was the one thing he genuinely liked in the world. But he couldn't bring himself to say it out loud. Instead, he fumbled for an answer, eventually landing on something that had been swirling in the back of his mind. "I like this idea I have," he said slowly, "about being a catcher in the rye. You know that song, 'If a body catch a body coming through the rye'? I keep picturing all these kids playing in a big field of rye. And I'm the only one there, standing on the edge of this crazy cliff. And my job is to catch them before they fall off. That's all I do all day. Catch kids, keep them safe." Phoebe tilted her head, her brow furrowed in thought. "Holden, you got the song wrong," she said. "It's 'if a body meet a body,' not catch." Holden waved her off. "I don't care how the damn song goes. That's what I like, okay? That's what I do." For a moment, there was silence. Then Phoebe nodded, as if she understood exactly what he meant. And maybe she did. Maybe she was the only one who could. Their conversation turned quieter as the night wore on, the kind of deep, rambling talk that only siblings can have. Holden felt lighter with Phoebe, as though some of the weight he carried had been lifted, even if only temporarily. But when he told her he was planning to leave, To go somewhere far away and escape everything. Phoebe's face darkened. I'm coming with you, she said firmly, her small hands clenched into fists. Holden laughed softly, shaking his head. No, you're not. You're staying right here. I'm serious, Holden. If you're going, I'm going too. Her determination struck him like a blow. He realized then how much she loved him, how much she looked up to him, and it made his chest tighten with guilt. He couldn't drag her into his mess. She deserved better than that. You can't come, Phoebe, he said gently. You've got school. You've got everything here. I just screw it all up. Phoebe didn't argue, but the disappointment in her eyes was almost too much to bear. She lay back down, turning away from him, and for a moment, Holden thought she might cry, but she didn't. She was stronger than he was in some ways. The decision Holden stayed until she fell asleep again, watching the slow rise and fall of her small chest. He felt an overwhelming urge to protect her, to keep her safe from the world and all its phoniness. But deep down, he knew he couldn't. She would grow up, face disappointments, and fall off her own cliffs, just like everyone else. Before he left, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Good night, kid," he whispered. Then he slipped out of the apartment as quietly as he had entered, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he couldn't stay. Preview of Part 5. Breaking point as Holden leaves the apartment. He steps further into the cold, both literally and figuratively. His encounter with Phoebe has given him a glimmer of connection, but his internal struggles remain unresolved. Exhausted and spiraling, he seeks refuge with an old teacher, Mr. Antolini, only to encounter another unsettling disappointment. Will this push him to his breaking point, or lead him closer to understanding himself?